Here's the Indie Review Show.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Welcome to the show, ladies and gents. How's it going, Corey?
Good. We are back from our 1 week break.
Yes, that was a crazy week.
Yeah. So we forgot to discuss who was going to pitch first. I think I need to pitch first, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't have much to pitch at this point, but you can go to coreykerr.com and you can check out some of my animations and whatnot. And if you go to coreykerr.com/online, then you'll see all of the most recent things, one of which would be Instagram. And if you haven't watched it yet, go watch the most recent thing I posted on Instagram because it is an animation that I did for Wacom, and I'm really excited about it. Josh, what do you have to pitch?
Awesome. Well, so we missed the intro, so I want to explain what this is to people. So this is a series where we review the best of indie comics and other media like movies, television, cartoons, books, and I don't know if I mentioned, but comics. So the idea is that we're going to pull back the curtains on our inspirations. And Corey and I have both been professional illustrators, cartoonists, animators, graphic designers, taught and teach at the college level, and we're getting into the comics and graphic novels that inspire us. And speaking of comics and graphic novels that inspire us, I will pitch a comic and graphic novel that might inspire you, which is my graphic novel, Two Stories. It's a memoir about faith and mental illness and depravity and ultimately redemption in a fallen world. And right now it's on sale on Amazon for like $9, which is insane. I think I might actually lose money on the sales. And I'm not saying that in like a used car way. I mean, literally I might. But go take advantage of that and pick up a copy if you haven't. And if you wanted to get it for a friend or anything like that, this would be the time to do it because it's like $4 over what Marvel charges for a floppy, and it's an independent 122-page graphic novel. And with that being said, are we ready, Corey?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Boom. Whoa. Okay, I'm really excited about this just from that beautiful graphic design. Look at that design.
There's such good stuff in this. Okay, so today I'm not going to be covering these 4 volumes, but I just wanted to show you like where this story is going. Is just kind of completely insane with Nazi scientists and talking space dogs and cosmonauts and all kinds of interesting things.
Whoa,
so
that's amazing.
There's like a secret cabal of people that are like running the government, and one of them is an old Egyptian. One of them is like a professional wrestler. So there's just like, this is my kind of just ridiculous insanity. I love it.
That is amazing.
So,
I also just like, man, holy crap. Like the cartooning, I'm already really excited about. That's cool.
Yeah, Nick Pitarra is a really interesting artist. So anyway, so the Manhattan Projects, we'll do the kind of intro here, and we're just going to go through kind of volume 1. Push these out of the way without having them fall off. So the Manhattan Projects by Jonathan Hickman and Nick Pitarra. So this is one of those books where I'm continuing to be like, oh man, and here's some indie lettering that's sticking out to me that's totally crazy and different and new than all the other stuff that I was enjoying. And it's still Russ Wooten. So Russ Wooten is still doing a lot of the books that I'm doing. Jordi Belair on colors, Nick Pitarra is the artist, and Jonathan Hickman is the writer. And this is Image. So I'm going to start in the back here because actually they have this very handy little guide of who is who in each collected volume. And so in this volume, we have Joseph Oppenheimer, super genius, American physicist, multiple personalities. Albrecht Einstein, highly intelligent, German physicist, drinks. Richard Feynman, super genius, American physicist, wormholer. Enrico Fermi, super genius, Italian physicist, not human. Harry Daghlian, super genius, American physicist, irradiated. Werner von Braun, super genius, German, rocket scientist, robot arm. Leslie Groves, not a genius, American, general, smokes, bombs. FDR, artificial intelligence, computational super genius, American president, dead. Harry S. Truman, not a genius, American president, Freemason. So those are the characters in this book, and what you're going to find is that the Manhattan Project takes place. I'm not exactly sure. It's a historical fiction, but it could actually be reality if you look at it a specific way. Because at one point in time, they invent the ability to travel between dimensions, kind of through string theory, and so this actually could be like an alternate dimension had things gone slightly differently.
Oh, okay.
And at one point in time, you have Albert Einstein being replaced by Albrecht Einstein from another dimension, and Albrecht is an evil version from a darker timeline. And each little section starts off with the recorded Feynman, who is basically just Richard Feynman's journal, and they're kind of interesting little looks. And we start in volume 4, so who knows what's going on beyond that. So here we have Oppenheimer, and he is meeting with General Graves.
Oh man, just the loose, kind of gritty, just indie style of the drawing is really cool. Like I really dig it.
Yeah. The thing that you'll notice about the artist Pitarra here is really interesting in that he is very good at likeness,
Yeah.
but doesn't really hold himself down to any like rigid rules of anatomy or structure, and so it's loose, it's indie, but like he doesn't like lose characters from scene to scene or whatever. You're very clear on who is who the whole time, and so it's really good. So anyway, he's meeting with the general here, and the general kind of explains that politics and politicians call meetings like this formalities. And he's basically saying we're behind schedule. We're trying to invent a bomb so that we can basically end the war. But know that as the civilian head of this endeavor, you and I will be forced to maintain a collective longer view than the political animals who whore for votes each election cycle. For us, wartime never ends, and this program cannot be held to the whims of gutless cogs in the DC machine. We have more important concerns. And so, and I love like just the office is just covered in weapons whenever this guy is around. I mean, he has like a live grenade that he's wearing on his lapel as like a lapel pin. He's armed to the teeth at all times and is constantly surrounded by weapons. So you can see, like this is the big boy, obviously much smaller. He's got a Tommy gun here. He's got a 50 cal kind of mounted rifle. They're just kind of all over the place. And then he says, do I have to worry about anything with you? Your brother's a communist, and he says, I'm not my brother. And he says, fantastic. I sincerely hate killing a man that's made it this far in the vetting process. So Dr. Oppenheimer is welcomed into the Manhattan Projects.
I love it. And Frank rightly pointed out that his suit is very Pee Wee Herman-esque, Oppenheimer, which is interesting.
Yeah. And yeah, and you will find we've got a little bit of a hint as I introduced Oppenheimer, but you'll find Oppenheimer to be a really interesting character throughout this, and Pee Wee Herman would be kind of a good model for the way that you should read his voice, I feel like. And then we go into chapter 1, Infinite Oppenheimers. And this is something that the colorist does throughout this, where we have juxtaposition of concurrent events, and you can tell who is evil and who is good by who is red and who is blue.
Oh, nice.
And so what we have here is we have twins in the womb developing and being born. And we basically have an evil twin and a good twin. So Robert Oppenheimer was born on April 22nd, 1904. He is good because he's blue. And his twin brother Joseph was born on April 23rd, 6 minutes later. And then so there's anytime they go red blue, we're jumping into the past. And it's one of those tricks where they don't need to say, 35 years earlier, because you just kind of know in the storytelling that's happening. And the next few pages, I'm gonna try not to read the entire thing, but like there's so many good lines in this that I really love. So he's going through and he talks about, it's kind of all this dialogue about like the secrecy of things and how they're supposed to be building the world's first atomic bomb. And he says, but I assure you, Dr. Oppenheimer, the truth is we are working on much more interesting things. And so they're going through and he says, Dr. Seaborg and Mr. McMillan are currently mining something called pan-dimensional space for the fluid materials we need to build our impossible machines of expansion. For example, we use divergence engines to recover mythological artifacts from discarded space. These are imaginary weapons made real through the scientific exploration. So you've got like a trident here. And I mean, you can tell that there's different kind of mythological kind of artifacts. And what I love about the writing and about this panel, these have no bearing on anything. It's kind of like a throwaway panel just to like set this insane scene of whatever. And he says, look here, we've joined 150,000 mainframes together with the hopes of mimicking the human mind. Apparently it's going to be a thinking computer. Oppenheimer says artificial intelligence offensive. And so anyway, he basically says, whatever you want to do, we'll provide the resources. This is unfettered science. And so he says, excuse me, there's a man locked in this room. And this is our first glimpse of Albert Einstein. And for whatever reason, the general has locked him in there. And he says, I will get him out. He's in there for a very good reason, and I'll let him out when I feel like it. So then we continue to explore different things. And then they hear an alarm going off. And he says it's the Japanese. And then we have a flashback again. And so you'll notice that these two things are similar to each other. And so they relate. There's a bit of like poetic chiasmus going on, but the red is twisted. So in the blue, it looks like they're wrestling and they're happy. And then the red is like choking them out. This goes through the twins. And at the end, we see that Robert Oppenheimer was an emerging titan of the scientific world, and that Joseph Oppenheimer was an emerging titan of the genocidal world, who he had. So this is kind of an important point. Joseph goes through and does tests on animals, and then because he loves them and wants to be with them all the time, he kills them and eats them and consumes all of their knowledge.
Oh my goodness.
He says so awesome. He loves them, so how could he not? And then back to the present time.
Gosh, I love the colors too. I mean, sorry, just the colorist is doing such interesting stuff with like these really saturated, solid colors right next to a bunch of desaturated kind of like colors that are analogous, and so it like just makes this like super amazing point of focus, and also just this retro feel. I love it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And if you look at something like this panel right here, it's a really good example of that. Is you've got this analogous kind of or even monochromatic green, and then this one spot of red. And I've heard this described as the soloist choir color theory, where you just have a tiny bit of opposition to the whole. And that's the thing that stands out. And so you've got this, and I love that even like the paint is giving us an idea of the motion that's going on. So it breaks into the building, and it's got this like juxtaposition of That's not shoji. I can't remember what this arch is called. But anyway, they've got this giant thing, and then he says a red torii, no doubt Zen powered by death Buddhists.
Death
So,
Buddhists. That's
yeah,
amazing.
right. So
I'm already in love. You've already made me totally interested in this comic just because of the
death Buddhists.
Yeah, that's
Just
got me
wait until you
fascinated.
meet the death Buddhists. They're amazing. And so the general says, "Get me a telepath down here immediately." And as they're being attacked, by these kind of like
sweet.
cyborg robotic things. He's telling Oppenheimer it's time to grab a gun, and Oppenheimer says, but in the face of chaos, inexperience is the enemy. Perhaps I should refuse. And he says, no, doctor, absolutely not. This is America. Everyone gets a gun. And then we have these little boxes that pop up to explain the mechanics of the machines that are attacking them. And so it gives us like a little history, designed
like the designer, and I love it.
Gives us the name of the designer, and it gives us, they have a 12 horsepower engine with a 1 gallon onboard fuel storage capacity. And this little description of engineering is happening while all of these soldiers are being killed.
This is massacre.
And then Oppenheimer is here with a mounted machine gun and casually having a good time, like blowing everybody away. And he keeps saying, So then we get the paramedics in time. They go through. There's kind of some more, some more things about them. And then he says, that machine is going to touch me now. Offensive. And then he says, see, you shouldn't do that. And so then he stomps it to death. And he says, easy, doctor. I'm pretty sure it's dead. And
I like that this giant like military brass guy has to pull back like Oppenheimer from just a murderous rage.
Yeah, it's great. And then we jump to back in time a little bit, but not too far back. And we see that the good Oppenheimer twin, is going through, and he finally gets this letter where he's going to be invited to the Manhattan Project, the secret thing. He's really excited. And then he finds out that his evil mass murdering twin brother has escaped from prison, is presumed dead, is not dead, kills his brother. And because he loves him, he consumes him completely so that his soul might forever live with him because he loved him. How could he not? And so the person that actually met the general earlier is actually the evil twin who has consumed the soul of his good twin. And so now, as Robert was dying, he could hear his brother whispering over and over, now it will become both halves of the world, the whole. And so now he is starting to become infinite Oppenheimers. And this little note here in Feynman, he says, in the beginning, when I was first joined the projects, before his internal civil war, before the great culling, before the amalgamated Oppenheimer coalesced, 32 distinct versions of the doctor existed. From there, the rate of fracture increased exponentially. And by 1968, that number was virtually endless. And then we have the SS lightning bolts. And we're in Nazi Germany. And so we see
I'm already like I love stories that twist like this, like that sort of play with historical fiction in a fun kind of lighthearted way, and it's just so fun. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's I'm really intrigued.
Yeah, it's fascinating because if you look at each of these scientists' lives, obviously they're not like this, but at the same time, Hickman did his research and he has reasons for each one of them being like they are in this comic.
Yeah.
And so like each thing is actually related to things that happened to them or that they did or that they said. and there are different points in time where he takes like actual quotes from them and then changes one word and completely distorts the meaning. So anyway, so this is Werner von Braun, Nazi SS scientist, being outfitted with a new mechanical robot arm as he walks through a field talking to Hitler about the cause. And Hitler is saying, I'm going to have you answer to Himmler, and you'll have everything you need, and you will build me mighty rockets, and with them we will reach out and burn our enemies in our bed. And he basically asks, are you committed? And he says, I tell you honestly, for me, there is only one thing of consequences, and that is the cause, which Hitler takes to assume that that is the Nazi cause, which to his detriment, he shouldn't have assumed that. So chapter 2 is Rocket Man. And we meet Richard Feynman, who is an incredibly narcissistic perfectionist who probably has OCD. And he's talking to himself in the mirror while his female conquest of the previous night is trying to talk to him, and he says, you're very kind, please don't interrupt me. And then he repeats his, good morning, Mr. Feynman, you're smart, you're handsome, and you're a very special person. And takes his helicopter to work, is given a dispatch, and is a little surprised that he's going to be the one that gets Albert Einstein out of lockup. They start talking about this monolith, and we meet our friends, the Death Buddhists. And this is the Death Buddhists and what they look like. So they're all tatted up with gauge earrings and sharpened nails. And the Death Buddhists, you see that we have we've kind of taken the red Tory, and they are our telepath, or the American telepath, took control of one of the Death Buddhists through the red Tory so that they couldn't close the gate. And now the Manhattan Project has teleportation. And Einstein here is not a nice person. And so, the Death Buddhist is saying, please help us, we suffer. And they're basically saying that, we're running out of Death Buddhists because they're not meant to continue to hold this open, and they keep dying. And Einstein says, well, we'll have to find some volunteers to take their place. So anyway, so then we get a little FDR action here, talking about kind of onboarding some Nazi scientists, and they go around the room to all the different people, and you see everybody's opinion of what should be happening. And I haven't pointed this out yet, but Dahlgren here, he was irradiated and killed in real life because of his research in the Manhattan Project. But in this book, he was irradiated and became somebody who has a half-life of 24,000 years. And so everything except the calcium in his bones melted away, and he has to be contained. Fermi is some sort of alien, non-human, that has kind of joined the team. And each of these people, and whenever we see Oppenheimer start talking, we also see him arguing with different versions of himself. And it's very clear in the pacing of the dialogue that that's what's happening when he says, and then you also see that he will go through, and he'll be talking about something and then say, and you know that he's having an argument with multiple versions of himself. So the general asks, who here can fly? And everybody except Feynman raises their hand, and he doesn't know what that means. And then they throw him out of an airplane to into occupied Germany. And they siege the castle that was holding the Nazi scientists. And as they're attacking it, you see Werner von Braun telling everybody that it's important that the Allied forces do not get the knowledge that the Nazis have given. So he opens up this chest that has a skull and bones and a little thermos, and gives this big speech. Everybody kills themselves, And then it turns out that he didn't take a drink, and so he's the only one left. Feynman, who, it's funny because we're now in like this dirty castle full of like crazy Nazi scientists, and we've already been kind of introduced to like the perfection that he lives in, and he is very uncomfortable here. So they have this conversation, and basically Werner von Braun says, "You don't have a choice. You know, like I've got Nazi propulsion, and I've killed everyone. And so I'm the only one here, and I have all the bargaining chips. I need citizenship, and I want to be part of your Manhattan projects." And so, anyway.
Oh my gosh. I have to compliment the costuming and the props, because it's like it's writing this interesting line of like, well, it's somewhat slightly representational. It's also, like you mentioned at the top, more exaggerated and like kind of caricatured. And then the props and the costuming are just like cartoon villains, but just in like a very like rendered and considered way, but still like, you know, like the case with the skull on it, and like even his uniform is like an exaggeration of an SS uniform. It's so it's just I don't know, it's got like an Indiana Jones-ish vibe to the way it's kind of, you know, playing with like things that kind of existed, but twisting it and exaggerating it and making it absurd. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I mean, the way that they play with things, you know, is just, I don't know. It's very interesting. So like in this room, we've just got this giant head and this Egyptian sarcophagus, and this statue of Neptune and a toy duck. and you see that like in the room, like Feynman walks in and then just picks up the toy duck and starts like using it to gesture and stuff as he's trying to convince Einstein to come with him. So they're having problems kind of trying to solve the bomb. And then we cut back to the general's dad, who is a military preacher. And so he says, you know, through that service of both war and peace, I have experienced the very best and worst of man. And the answers are always in God's word. And so he comes in here and he says, read this in the original Hebrew. And he says, so he starts reading that, and it says what God fears is the righteous, but that can't be right, is it? And he says, but it is. You see, the verse can be translated in two ways, either the way that you just read it or the way that you've learned it. You have discovered the truth for yourself as I have. I believe this is the point of those holy words. No one exceeds the reach of the righteous. And then we have Daglin and Fermi kind of going and hanging out with the plutonium. Daglin, who's already been irradiated, is drinking it in and kind of re-energized by it, and Fermi's being very careful. And then FDR dies. And then we go and meet the vice president, who's a Freemason, and we see that he's in the middle of his ceremony. And these are like Where's Waldo pages of like the best. I mean, there's like snakes and skulls and, you know, and like, you know, candles on the skulls. And then if you look really closely in these pages, you see like sheep that are being led around, and then a library cart. You know, and then like, anyway, there's more, they get more and more crazy. And anyway, so they kind of take him away, and he's got this incredible hat. And he's being told here that he needs to go. He's like, well, I'm in the middle or something. And he's like, yes, but you need to be sworn in as president. He smiles a little bit. And then
he's just in his like strange sheep sacrificing ritual for the Freemasons, and just had to be interrupted to become sworn in as president.
Right.
It's so fun.
So then they rush the recently dead FDR into the Manhattan projects. And I love this line. I also love the lettering here, because Daglin is now dead, and so he speaks with black, white on black rather than black on white. So you can. That's one of those. That's one of those typography things that letterers do that where you know that his voice sounds different. And I just love that. And he says, "You're dead. This won't hurt a bit." And so anyway, so they stab in the head, and they connect him to the supercomputers, and they create the first artificial intelligence out of FDR.
I love it. So FDR is now going to. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So FDR is now going to be used as the supercomputer. While, and I can't remember this guy's name, but who took over after? Let's see. We'll come over. Who came after FDR?
Johnson?
It was Harry S. Truman.
Oh, Truman. Okay.
Yeah. And so here we have Oppenheimer meeting Truman, and Truman is very confused the entire time, and Oppenheimer's kind of making fun of him, and he's just like, "You're kind of weird. Are you okay?" And then the general's on the phone, and the general intentionally misunderstands what the president is saying, and Truman is saying, "Do not drop the bomb," and the general pretends like he misheard that. And so he's going through all this stuff, and Oppenheimer is kind of mumbling to himself with the typography being very small. So you can see the change in size. And that's another thing that I love about comic lettering is the change in size changes the volume that you read that.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so he just says, to himself, what he's saying is that forget Imperial Japan, your true war is with ignorance. Another insult to Truman there.
I want to point out too, it's interesting that it doesn't do all caps, which is actually not always that common in comics. So
right. Cool. And usually when you don't have all caps in comics, it kind of makes it hard to read. Mm-hmm. But he's done it in such a way that you almost don't even notice that it's uppercase, lowercase.
Yeah.
So anyway, so then we get this cutting back and forth between three different scenes in a seamless way. So this is the B-2 bomber, and these are the guys. And I love that there's just like a guy over here in a white shirt and tie. There's a naked guy with a helmet on. There's a guy in a wife beater, and then a guy in full. And they're just all, they're just all hanging out about to drop the bomb. And the general goes back and forth, saying, "I need to know what to do, Mr. President." And then these guys are connecting FDR to the network. And then these guys are kind of continuing that. And it says, "Incredible, we've created the first artificial intelligence in the history of the world, and it's Franklin Delano Roosevelt." And then we go back to Truman. "I'm sorry, Mr. President, I still couldn't make that out." He said, I said, "Terminate the operation, call the plane back." He says, "Continue the mission?" "No, abort the mission, abort." And then we cut back, and we're starting to hook up FDR to a ticker tape machine. And the general is continuing to pretend like he doesn't understand what Truman is saying. And then we come back to FDR, and we go back to Truman, and just cutting back and forth. It feels erratic, and because they're changing from these three different scenes, reading through this, the pacing becomes frenetic, and you can feel like the tension build. And then it says, then Truman FDR spits out, "All we have to fear is ourselves."
Oh, instead of fear.
Yeah. And so then the general says, so everybody in the room asks the general, "What did the president say?" And the general puts the phone down and says, "He said, no one exceeds the reach of the righteous, burn them down." And so then they drop the bomb. After Hiroshima, at the urging of General Groves and Director Oppenheimer, the FDR artificial intelligence established a shadow government of the United States. And then we have, and this might be an actual quote, I have to look this up, but "A human being is part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space," Albert Einstein. So then we go to Roswell, New Mexico.
Oh,
And
I love this so
there's a
far.
conversation happening here between what looks like a British guy and a Russian guy and a couple Americans. And I love that the British guy has a parasol because that just cracks me up.
Yeah, the
And
costuming again, just that it really stands out to me, like the world building and costuming, and even though it's very cartoony, it just makes it so much fun, and it really, like, every prop and thing like included in it just kind of enriches the environment and the story. I love that.
yeah, and one of the things that was really entertaining is watching Nick Patera on Twitter while he was drawing this years ago. And he would just say, like, I'm just going to have, they go to a funeral. And for no particular reason at all, Patera had Albert Einstein walk around the funeral with a sawed-off shotgun and a wife beater for that entire issue. Just and no one ever mentioned it, and no one ever, he didn't use it for anything. It was just there. So they're about to meet the Greys. They're gray, thin, with immense heads and bulbous eyes. The conversation is a little bit hard, but they use light and sound to communicate. But we figured all that out. And then a different race of aliens actually shows up.
Look at that great, like, pug looking. That's amazing. The big purple aliens are amazing.
And I love that they have like half a fishbowl on their head.
Oh my gosh, they're amazing.
And one of the best things is they kind of go back and forth between this translation. And so he says, let's see if I can get this. He says, load language, yellow dwarf, 26.74, class M3 English. And then he begins speaking English. So he loaded English into his brain so that he could have this conversation. And then we jump back to
those aliens. This yeah, I'm taking this.
And it gets significantly better in later volumes where they start traveling around and doing things. So this is Albert Einstein, who has this idea, and you can tell that the notebook is not a good idea because it is red. And so he starts to, he's a man of crossroads, of choice, of possibility. He saw a passage and an opening, a gateway to a better world, and he begins building this thing. And then we cut back to Feynman, who is getting FDR some better ways to communicate. So now we see a TV screen, and he's got a speaker. FDR is spitting out all kinds of data because they've hooked him up to every piece of information that they have, and he's having like data overload. Albert Einstein comes in and says, I need your help with something, unplugs FDR to get his attention. And another kind of throwaway panel where we don't know what's going on. We're just walking by weird sea creatures. There's some sort of experiment going on that we don't know about. And that gets more and more as we go on. There's just these automatons that are walking around that no one pays any attention to and no one mentions anything about. And he's basically, Einstein is getting, Einstein at this point in time is asking for Feynman's help to find the key to this thing that he built and then forgot what happened. And so we have kind of this situation where he's building this.
There's
now we've got
in
some
the
dinosaur
background.
bones that are hanging out with him. Again, the red and blue thing. Feynman is starting to realize what's going on and figure out like how to make this thing work. It's a series of harmonics that you can do with your fingers. And so he goes through, and this is maybe one of the best lines because I think you have to be either a mathematician or an artist to think that this is funny. But he goes through and he's talking about like it's some sort of code. Do you think maybe you used the Fibonacci series? And Einstein says, what do I look like, a pedophile? And he says, right, then pi, I guess. And so then he types in pi and it opens. I don't know what the link between the Fibonacci series and pedophilia is, but it's just ridiculous. So then the door, we flash back to what has happened previous, and we now realize why it seems that Albert Einstein has forgotten the code. It's because we were not ever looking at Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein knew the code, and he met Albrecht Einstein, who came from another dimension. They meet each other, they have a quick conversation, and Albrecht hits Albert over the head with this snake staff. So he has this like weird snake staff behind his back, and he beats him over the head with it. And then he says, he looks through and he says, I see how you were able to do this. Science, delicious apostasy. And he goes through and he drags him through and he says, because, doctor, I could never get the portal on this side to work. Farewell. You are not going to like it here. And so Feynman opens it up for Albrecht, and Albrecht says, don't worry, I have some ideas on how to use this. So then we jump back to the meeting in Roswell with the aliens, and he's basically saying, I am going to offer you something. I'm going to give you the stars if you can give us the pulling machine, I think he calls it. Oh, the pulling way. He says, we've detected the pulling way. Oppenheimer decides that the conversation isn't going as well as he would like, and so he shoots the alien. The aliens begin to attack. The general pulls the British guy in front of him and starts using him as a human shield, blows up the other two aliens with a grenade, and then he says, doctor, are you okay? And again, we see and he says, I don't know what you were thinking, but, and then he says, Dr. Oppenheimer, what are you doing? And he says, I do not like when people watch me eat. And then he realizes that's what's going on, and we see that the alien has now been consumed and is now part of the infinite Oppenheimer. And so he now knows everything that they know. So then we jump back to a scene of Feynman and his dad, who's giving him a lesson and lets him choose between the belt and the stick. And then we jump back over here, and we see that we're going to get a little lesson on what's going on from Oppenheimer. And so Oppenheimer starts to describe the hive mind of the alien that he ate, and the alien interrupts him and argues with him. And one of the Oppenheimers inside of his head chokes him out, and then says, continue, brother. And then he says, I forgot where. Oh, yes, inevitabilities. Then he says, basically, if we don't do something, they're going to come and kill us.
I absolutely love the ongoing bit of the It's pretty hilarious.
So anyway, so they have a discussion about what they're going to do. We have Oppenheimer shouting at Oppenheimer as he's speaking. And they decide that they're going to go through the portal. And these three kind of come through. They're talking to everybody. It does not go well. And so after a series of things where this guy, his helmet got cracked, and he's got a collapsible baton, and he cracks open Doglin's helmet, which irradiates everybody because he's radioactive. And so they completely destroy this entire planet full of aliens who quickly melt away in the radiation, and save Earth. The one guy dies because his helmet broke. And so then we come back and we start to see that Oppenheimer discovers the portal, and he says, now you see, I think a certain Oppenheimer should say something appropriate for the occasion. He says, yes, indeed. We have become the destroyer of worlds, and the universe shuddered. And so now Infinite Oppenheimer has access to teleport to any planet that has one of those things on the other end. And that's volume 1 of Science Bad.
I adore that, and I like his villain hands together like pose at the very end where he's saying that too. Okay, before we get into anything else, I think it might be time to balance the books.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
and then we'll cut back. So let me throw this up here. So the Indie Review Show is brought to you by Audible. You can get a free audiobook and support this show by going to audibletrial.com/IRS. And this week, it's so funny, but it kind of ties in. My recommendation is the book The Last Lion, Winston Spencer Churchill, Volume 1, Visions of Glory. And it covers Winston Churchill's life from 1874 to 1932. And strangely, I've been noticing this just kind of weirdly happens with us. It totally ties in and corresponds with the book. But it's also just a really fascinating read. And just for people who are history buffs, this is insanely comprehensive. Just to give you an idea, it's 41 hours and 19 minutes. And I've been carving away at this on and off for about a year, but it's super fascinating. So anyhow, if you like this book, definitely you can get a free audiobook and support the show by going to audibletrial.com/IRS and getting your own free audiobook, which is great. I'm an Audible member myself and was before we even had a sponsorship from them. So I highly recommend it. It's great on a commute and it's great otherwise. So anyhow, also, if you like this book or any of the other books we're recommending, go to irsagency.com. And a really easy way to support the show, as well as this doing this Audible thing, is to click on one of the links on irsagency.com before you purchase anything on Amazon, and we get a kickback, and it doesn't raise the price for you. And with that being said, the audit that's done, and it's time to get back to the regularly scheduled audit. Okay, sorry. All right.
Yes. Gary says this is ridiculous in a good way.
Totally.
And Kayla says that this one's going on the comic wish list. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm definitely sold on it. I don't think I have much else to say other than I will say it kind of reminds me of like a Douglas Adams style of humor in the sense of the absurdness of it. But I love that it's almost like if you took historical figures and put them in a Douglas Adams plot. It's pretty, and I can tell, like, and I think it's just a reinforcement of when an artist is having fun and a writer is having fun. Like, you can definitely tell they're enjoying the process and just kind of playing. And sometimes that's just super fun. So. What I
want to show one more thing really quick, and I'll even leave it black and white. But this is the type of thing that you get. This is in volume 3, where they're having now it's not gonna work. But that's this guy with the skull, right? And he ordered an ice cream and can't eat it because he's in a radiated, levitating skull. Anyway.
And he's kind of like, just even the way he drew the guy's finger is like the finger is not just touching it, but it's like he kind of dipped it and then was like, oh, like it's drooping. I think that's the fun of this, is the cartooning itself like expresses the mood of the characters. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. So I mean, you mentioned that you're liking it, but anything in particular that stood out, and then I'll talk about some of the things that I'd like to steal from this.
So I mean, the color is awesome, and I do like the play with color where it's fairly representational, but they do a lot of like I mentioned it along the way, like really focusing saturation in specific areas, and I think that's a really cool way. I like the way the colorist is color holding as well a lot. I think that really, like, a lot of people when they're first digitally coloring will sort of struggle with making colors sing, and one of the easiest ways is just to take black out of the equation, like, because black line art over color like can kind of desaturate. And so I do like that they use a lot of color holds to make it a little more candy-like in the appearance.
Yeah.
I love the costuming, and I love the use of historical characters, and I love absurdity, and so the plot. But there is something just really inspiring about the execution of it. That it's loose lines. There aren't a lot of heavy blacks. It's it's just a really fun style, but definitely informed and intelligent and well researched. But like, it's like a well researched joke, and my favorite kind of humor is a well researched joke. So
Yeah.
yeah, it feels like a Monty Python bit actually, like as a plot. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's really great.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's very different than a lot of other stuff that Hickman does, and I love it when a writer can do different things. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about this type of thing. But I mean, Jonathan Hickman. I mean, he's obviously an incredible writer. But a couple things that really stand out to me, that there's no need for Nick Pitarra to try to be what he isn't. He is unabashedly and unashamedly the type of artist that he is, and you don't see him struggle with, oh, I wish I was, Art Adams, or I wish I was. It's just, he's got that style. He's got the looks of the characters down, and actually you would think that he's just kind of like freehanding a lot of stuff, but in actuality, I've seen him on Twitter post pictures of the way that he's working, and at one point in time, to get the perspective correct of this one scene where this robot was being disassembled, he taped 3 yardsticks together so that he could get the lines and everything. So I mean, he's actually very precise for like a loose cartoony style, and a lot of people might miss the precision in what he's doing because it feels fast, but he's very precise. Anyway, I love everything about this. And then again, Russ Wooten one more time, who was the same letterer that was doing the East of West that I did last time.
Oh wow, okay.
Totally different style, and it fits and it feels right for this book. And I love it when letterers are able to match the mood of the book rather than be like, I use this font and these type of balloons no matter what I do. And so that's great. And I agree with you on the colors. I think probably my favorite thing, and this is going to come as no surprise to anybody who's watched this more than a couple episodes of this show, is I just love ridiculous insanity. I love things that don't take themselves too seriously, but are also really written well and have a level of intelligence, like Frank is saying, the Fibonacci joke. Maybe, I mean, if you have to have some kind of education to know that, Fibonacci golden mean thing exists for that to even be funny in the first place. But at the same time, they don't like beat you over the head with it. And if you miss it, it doesn't ruin anything. And so there's intelligence, and there's fun, and it's mixing just a lot of the things that I just really enjoy. And I like doing historical things with alternate depictions that are twisted and weird and that type of stuff. And so,
I think one thing we should also mention is just, sorry, the artist again, I'm blanking now.
Nick Pitarra,
amazing artist. And I will say those crowd scenes too are just so cool.
Right.
And you can tell that that's kind of one of the things that he excels at, because he'll mix them in, and he does it so, like, as you just mentioned, he does them so elegantly in the layout, but like the final execution, he keeps the lines open.
Right.
And so it creates like this fun look, like they don't look labored, but to anyone who knows their salt at, like, doing a crowd scene like that is labor, but it's just like he does it so smoothly. I'm just blown away by those crowd scenes.
Yeah. So anyway, I could talk about this book forever, but that's pretty much volume 1. I believe of 7. They get captured at some point in time. There's Star City, where the the Russians and the Americans create the shadow government of Russian scientists and the shadow government of the US scientists that are operating independently of their own governments, but siphoning off the funds. They decide that they should, there's this big conversation that continues to happen about collective knowledge base. And the ideas that I didn't touch on in my review, but the ideas that of what Werner von Braun points out is what he was saying to Hitler is, I am all for the cause. He later points out that the cause, is unfettered science. The cause is science without restriction, exploration for the point of exploration. And so it is an interesting look. And I love that on the back of every single one of these, it just says science bad. It's just every single one of the trade paperbacks just points out and I think it's a little bit of a nod to what I call the rule of Jurassic Park. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's great. So they go and they conquer worlds, and they start to go to space, and they are teleporting all over and it just gets more and more ridiculous. And then there's cosmic wars that are going on that they're causing and controlling and manipulating, and they're mining different energy fields from different. Anyway, it just gets insane. And then they have this Russian and American during the Cold War. They are creating things that are fueling the Cold War so that they can get more funding, but are actually working together. The two shadow governments are working together to just create more science, but using the puppet governments that everybody recognizes and pretending like they're fighting each. Anyway, and it just and that's all like background stuff that nobody even really cares about. But it's just fascinating the way that these geopolitics that they've gone in, and they're like, wouldn't it be cool? Because they basically created the atomic bomb in this comic in like a week. They're like, yeah, let's just knock this out of the way, and then we won't tell anybody that we created it for a while so that we can still get funding. And they started building all this other stuff. And once they got FDR AI up and running, then they were all set, and he was able to get him the secret funding. And that's why a hammer costs $20,000 and stuff. It's because anyway. So anyway, it's fun. It's silly. It's crazy. It's super weird. And it's just an enjoyable level of weirdness. And then you can look up the quotes, and you can look up the characters, and you can read about oh, that's why one of the Oppenheimers inside of, because there's an entire series of issues that's called the Oppenheimer Civil War, where he is fighting with himself, but it's happening in the mindscape. And so the battle is insane because it's just whatever red and blue Oppenheimer can think of. and there's this one guy that just continues to punch this horse over and over and over again, who keeps talking to him. And anyway, it's just silly. It's just like it almost wouldn't work in any other medium, and I love it for that. I don't. You might be able to translate it to animation, but it would still lose something. There are comics that translate very well to cinema and very well to other things. And this one would be a stretch, but in itself, that's not a detriment. I just feel like they're using the medium for exactly what it should be used, and all of the tools and tricks to control the pacing and the volume and the tone of everything that you're reading is just fun. So it's just highly recommended. It's really fun, and it's a silly book.
And I think that's inspiring because, to me, I think what any artist should take away from this is just because you're being silly doesn't mean the style has to suffer. Right. I think that, to me, the best jokes, the best bits, this is what reminds me about Python, about Monty Python when seeing this, is if you watch Holy Grail, I know it's low budget and stuff like that, but they committed. They commit to that movie. It's pretty historic. It's kind of pretty authentic period wise. I've actually heard
I have a few English nerd friends who like really looked into the whole Mort Darthur thing and stuff. And it's like, I've heard from a lot of people that it's like actually close to one of the best interpretations of those books, even though it's a comedy. And,
Right.
and so it's like, you can both be funny and also like have a lot of history and research and really just like put your guns into it, like in the way the artist is like throwing a rubber duck into a scene for the sheer joy of just that moment where you can have the character pick up a rubber duck while he's talking. Like
Right.
I think it's a really good case in point of that. Like whenever I've done humor stuff, I've always tried to do that. Like put everything I can into making it the best drawing, because that just makes it funnier. And so that's, what a cool series. And it just looks like a lot of fun and worth checking out.
Yeah, I agree.
Amazing.
So are we going to do your channel or my channel for the after party?
Whichever. It can be on yours. I like it. I like the after party being on the person who picked the books channel. I think that's appropriate. So
in a few minutes, we're going to jump over to my YouTube channel.
Yes.
And you can find that at coreykerr.com/online. You'll see a YouTube link there. Or you can just search my name. But Josh, real quick, let's do some plugs.
Oh yes. As I said before, 2 Stories right now is on sale. This is my graphic novel, my 122-page graphic novel, which I'd say the one thing it has in common with the book we just looked at is I really go out of my way to try to make comics that do things that only comics can. And I think you'll see a lot of things in here that are very unique to comics. And also it's autobiographical, very not funny, very much older adult book. But yeah, 122 pages on Amazon right now for $9. So I think it's about $9 right now. If you're watching this after the fact, it might be back to the regular $19.99 price. So go get it. And that'll do it. Maybe if I put a dog on it, people will pay more for it. A Shiba Inu on it, everybody will jump at that cost. But yeah.
And you can find my stuff by going to coreykerr.com, and if you click on what's new, or go to coreykerr.com/online, and you'll see all the most recent things, including my award-winning animation, several animations that I did for Wacom and episode 1 of Endo Exo, plus a comic I wrote a little bit a while ago, which actually has a bunch of historical people in it, as well as some mythology and stuff kind of mixed in with some silliness as well. So you can see some real influence of today's. And then if you go to irisagency.com, then it'll take you to this page and you will see what's up next. And so here's previous episodes that we've done. And next week, Josh is going to be doing Winsor McKay, his life and art. I'm going to be covering Tale of Sand. Josh is going to do Darth Vader and His Son, and then I'm going to do I Killed Giants, which will be an interesting one because there's a movie which I feel like is an excellent adaptation of that as well, that you can watch on Amazon Prime. So check out all of that stuff. And
Corey,
yes,
real quick too, you shared this with me, but I do think it's important to point out, like, some of the books we're reviewing, it seems like some of them are getting picked up and adapted. So like the neat thing about this show is you can kind of follow along with these things, and some of them may not have been made into films yet. So if you guys are following along with us, you're going to be ahead of the curve when something like Invincible comes out, which is a book that Corey has on the queue that he's not sure when he's going to review. But the point being, like, I've just been noticing that a lot of these are getting greenlit. So it's a way to get ahead of the curve. And
if you want to be the cool guy in the group and say, well, actually in the comic, blah, 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 blah. And you got to watch the show and tell other people to watch the show. Because what was it? It was Lady Killer just got greenlit by Netflix. And so they're going to They're going to do Lady Killer. I Killed Giants is already out there. Invincible just wrapped its 8th episode for the first season, and so these are all things that we've talked about on the show. And Frank can't wait for the adaptation of Darth Vader and Son. So,
see, here's the thing. Corey was mentioning how I always bring up the artsy stuff, and that's probably the lowest form of art I'm going to bring up, but it's so good. All right, I love it.
And Gary's saying Blake Lively is going to play Lady Killer, and Anyway, I don't like realistic violence, so I wonder if I like it in cartooning. I wonder if I'll watch that one or not. I'm not sure. I'll have to kind of see. But yeah, I'm excited. So if you want to be ahead of the curve, and if you want to be the cool person who introduces your friends to cool things, tell them about the Indie Review Show.
Yes, become an IRS agent.
Yep. And you can become an IRS agent by participating in the show on Patreon, or by leaving us your review, your thoughts of the books that we're about to cover. So anything that's coming up, let us know what you think of it when you buy it through those links. Other than that, we will be on my channel in a few minutes after we do some fluid level adjustments. So we will catch you guys later. Stay indie. We're going to come up with some